Hi guys, welcome back to another interview. I'm very happy today. I have with me Simon Miller, writer of To the Strongest and co-writer The King and Parliament, correct, Simon?
That's right, that's absolutely correct.
Simon, before we start and getting into more details in the rules, can you give me a short background? How you started in wargaming, what rules you used to play with, and leading up to why you decided to make your own rule set? I mean, a small chronological analysis.
Well, I've always wargamed ever since childhood. My earliest memories revolve around toy soldiers, and when I was a kid, I played the usual things you played in the 70s, which was Napoleonics, micro tanks, airfix plastic figures. You know, anything that really came in the form of a soldier, I more or less had at the time. Then I went away to uni and got into role playing. But about, I guess about the year 2000, I got back into proper full steam wargaming again. And via role playing, I bought a few figures to use in the scenario, and then I bought a few more. And seemed enough to make a DBA army out of, and then a DBA army seemed a bit small, so I had 2 DBA armies, and I started using 4-sized things for DBA, and I drifted back into wargaming on a fairly large scale. But I couldn't find, for a very long time, I couldn't find a set of rules that quite suited me. I used to play some of the DBX rules back in the 80s. For a couple of years, I played competition, but they weren't quite what I was looking for coming around again. I think one of the things, funnily enough, that kicked off my interest was WAB. I only ever played one game of WAB, and I didn't particularly like the mechanics of it, but I did love the look of the figures. And the idea of big mass armies on a 6x4 or larger table in 28mm, they look absolutely terrific. We also did some gaming in 15mm with my friends. My local friends got a good collection of 15mm figures, and we enjoyed those. But I didn't take to the WAB rules, and I tried one or two other sets. They weren't quite right. I had a couple of goes at writing my own set, which also didn't really work out. And then one night, I was playing a game with a close friend, and we got into an argument about moving distances and wheeling. It was a difficult night, and I just thought, I'm not going to have any more measurement. Can't face any more measurement. I certainly can't face wheeling, and I can't face rules that don't deal with what happens if you hit a unit in the flank exactly. Do you line up? I wanted a pretty precise set of rules, but there wouldn't be much left. Well, hopefully there wouldn't be anything left to argue about in. And I had a few goes with grid-based rules a couple of years before, and I thought I'd have another stab at it. And I just decided to go for a square grid because hex grids. The other thing I played is some Command and Colors, which is an excellent game, and I liked that. But I didn't like the lack of flanks very much on the units, and I also wasn't completely convinced about hex grid for ancient and medieval wargaming, where things generally line up in lines. I sort of square grid had suited better, so I decided to write a set of rules on the square grid. And the breakthrough came one night when, after I'd been messing around with it for about 9 months, and it wasn't at all good, using 2d6 to generate a sort of activation system. And then one night, I had the idea of using a d10 instead, which gives a doesn't give you a bell curve; it gives you a straight line. And the real breakthrough was when I just had the idea of units moving multiple times during a turn, which is the activation system, which is really at the core of the rules, where you introduce a lot of improbability into the rules by allowing units to activate multiple numbers of times, possibly no times at all, but more likely once or twice. But the mechanism I came up with was for you'd initially roll a d10 and then activate the unit by rolling the d10 again and getting a higher number. And that was okay, except you couldn't recall the first number if you're rolling the dice again. So I had the idea of using playing cards, which most people use. Some people use wooden tokens, which I sell, wooden chits for activation. But on the whole, people have gone with playing cards. So I don't know if you'd have said to me like 6 years ago, oh, you're going to write a set of grid-based rules that are going to use playing cards for activations. I would have said, well, you're mad. You're mad. I don't like grids. Playing cards are big, ugly things. But it turns out that the cup is more than half full because the rules are really simple. They're very fast. It turns out playing cards are quicker to use than dice, for instance, because they never get a cocked one. They never go off the table. And the other great advantage is I like to play really huge games on a 15-foot table, 18, 20, 24. I think about 24 feet's the largest table we've used. And with the playing card, if one guy at one end plays 3 aces in a row, which happens, it does happen, everything goes horribly to ruin. The people 20 feet away down the other end of the table will be able to look over there and see him pulling his hair out and swearing loudly, and they'll be able to see why he's doing so. You can really easily see what your opponent is doing with playing cards, and there's always a moment when at the end of the turn, all the playing cards are gathered up, and that's a great time to take the photos that we like to take, because sometimes after a long turn, it looks like the tables, there's a blizzard going on with cards, cards everywhere. So anyhow, that's how I got into it. Basically, it was a frustration with the other rules. I would have very happily gone with another set of rules if there was one that I found that met my particular needs, which were to be able to play a game in about 2 hours on a 6x4 table without bursting a blood vessel in my brain because the rules were really hard, or to be able to play a game that's about 15 or 20 feet long with 6 or 8 people in a show. Again, with being able to, because it's, when you're running a game in a show, there's a lot of challenges to how you actually go about doing it. And that's why I ended up writing my own set of rules. And once I'd written them, I was taking the game around shows, and it seemed like a really good idea to publish them. We originally did as a PDF, and then quite soon afterwards as the print rule book, which I think has been out about 4 years now. Something like that, 4 or 5. And that was how the Ancient and Medieval set originally got published. And since then, I've been doing a lot of work refining the rules. I'm currently working on a Renaissance set, slowly. But I'm very near to having something I can play test, which is the same, broadly speaking, the same mechanism. Some of them a bit refined. Some of them I've simplified. Some others I've made a little bit more complex to add a little bit more detail and interest. There's a whole host of different certainly as you go from medieval into Renaissance, there's a whole host of different weapons coming through that you really need to look at the weapon rules to address. But that's how I got into it. It has been a blast. Sorry, I've not.
It's okay.
I've had a lot of fun and played a lot of games. We've got an online tournament underway at the moment. Started last week. I've not played my first game yet, but we're playing the Wars of the Roses tournament.
Oh, very interesting.
Using the rules, which actually turned out to be the most COVID-friendly set of rules you can have, because a grid-based set of rules turns out to be really easy to play. There's no measurement. There are no angles. We've had some clever guys come up with some fantastic applications using on Steam.
Yes, you're using the tabletop simulator. Yeah, I've seen To the Strongest the other. Yeah,
looks really brilliant. So the first one we did was a Dark Ages tournament, the 1066 tournament, which finished about 2-3 months ago. And the new one that started is Wars of the Roses, with obviously knights and longbows and bulls, and that seems to be going very well.
I remember when you published the rules. I mean, I have to say that To the Strongest now are one of the most popular rule sets. I could say I would let's say categorize To the Strongest the new era rules. You know, the ones that appeared the last decade. You know, not like you know, the new era. You have some rule sets that came up at that time, but they seem to be maybe the most popular rules and of the new sets that came, and it was very groundbreaking at that time, because you know, nobody had thought of grid, and cards were not used in gaming. So I remember when it initially came out, I'm sure that many people looked at it very strangely, but it seems, and from my experience also, because I played the game, I enjoyed it, that it became very popular because you managed to combine a fun gameplay with easy movement, but also you managed to do something that other rule sets cannot create. You managed to keep the historical accuracy, if there is a word like this in the rules. You didn't make it gamey. You really had, you know, the men at arms or the spearmen were strong against the mounted. I mean, you kept the balance, the equilibrium.
I mean, I was brought up on the well, back in the 80s when I played some competitive gaming. That was, I guess, WRG 6th or round about then, and 5th or 6th. I played 5th, I played 6th. They were great rules, and you know, the WRG done some fantastic work with. I mean, I love the things like all the different troop types they've got in there. I think, in fact, I've got more troop types in my rules, probably than they have. But I love the troop types and the interactions between units. I mean, it's quite clever in even in DBA. Those work. You know, that's a pretty simplified game, but even in that, they work very well. And I'm very interested, particularly. I would say I was certainly more interested in the ancient warfare aspect when I started writing the rules, but now I'm probably quite as interested in the sort of medieval / Renaissance, because I've kind of moved on with the rules. My armies are getting later and later, and the figures keep turning up with muskets and arquebuses now. It's really I found myself getting very interested in how the tactics change and the new troop types come in, and the new weapons come in, and the new tactics around those weapons. And I've tried to keep that in there, you know, which has meant changes. I mean, I'm on when we originally published the rules, I had one idea for the Polybian warfare. For instance, this is something that was coming up in a thread on TMP yesterday. we originally started off with really small units where I tried to represent the maniples of the Roman quincunx. And then about 2 years ago, I came up with a different system where I integrated the small units to form units of the main battle line. So that the unit represented both the Hastati and the Principes of a Roman legion. And then about 4 months ago, I've changed the rules again to what is undoubtedly the best system we've got, which is what we call the Quincunx now, which has the Hastati, the Principes, and the Triarii all in the same unit. Sort of a deep Roman unit that's a sort of real grinding machine. It can take a lot of damage thrown at it from the front and gradually chew its way through most of the units on the table in a frontal battle, but it's quite vulnerable from the flanks. And it's because it's relatively expensive. You can't, if you're the Roman player, have really strong cavalry wings. You know, your points are in the lead. So you've got local superiority. So you probably have to follow Roman tactics like trying to break through the middle of the enemy line, as they did with more or less success at various battles. I find I like to read the ancient texts. I like to read battle accounts, and I like to try and puzzle how you can build those things into the rules. And one of the things that's going to change in the new Renaissance set is in most areas, I think I've managed to simplify the mechanisms, based on the 4 or 5 years experience I've now got with the rules. But I've chosen to put a little bit more investment into missile weapons in the draft rules for that, because I want to bring out the difference between the different missile weapons, ranges, ability to penetrate armor, weapons that are more mass destruction like cannon, which become really vital as you get into the Renaissance. So yeah, I do love the history side of it. Yeah. Occasionally frustrating the people that play the game as I bring out an edict and change something. There's a supplement called Even Stronger, which I try and bring out about once every 3 months, and there's usually 1 or 2 new rules, or when there's the rules are played quite a lot competitively, because it works really well with a square grid. It works really well for a competition game. We can play 4 games in a day of competition gaming at the tournaments. We mostly each play 4 games during a day, which you can't play with many rules. But invariably, once you put a rule system in front of competitive gamers, the first time I did it, I was stunned because I thought the rules were pretty tight, and they drove a set of coach and horses through the rules. It was carnage. So the next year I went back, I plugged all the gaps in the rules, and I went back, and they found a whole new selection of ways of bending the rules. So every year I plug the holes, but invariably there's something new that comes through every year. They're always a half a step ahead of me, the competition gamers. But we have plugged them. It works very well. But it does mean I change things. So I'm a bit of a tinkerer.
Yeah, I know. I have to say also to mention that you have there is a lot of support in your website for the rules. I mean, all the army lists are free, quick reference sheets, everything there, and you renew it every once in a while. I was surprised because many rule sets take advantage and they create different supplements for people, but you have everything free there and with a lot of detail.
It's true. I mean, I've got the recent thing that we brought out of the 2 sets of the 2 booklets. The army lists were originally on Excel spreadsheets, and they worked fairly well, but they're not particularly attractive, and it did mean people had to download a lot of spreadsheets to actually play. And I spent a lot of time, about the last 3 months, rewriting the army lists and putting them into a new PDF format. and they do look really good now. And I'm due to next Friday, the the 25th. I'm hoping to publish. Well, it might be the 30th. I've got I've got more army lists. I've got 7 more army lists that are coming out, and I've added more detail to some of the existing lists, historical backgrounds, notes about how the armies fought, and I've improved the look of them again. And I'm starting to integrate some photos into them. So those will be out again in about 10 days' time. Inevitably, at some point, I will probably have to start charging for the army lists.
Yeah, of course.
Because they've taken a lot of time, and I've spent quite a lot of money on them as well. But probably not for 6 months or a year. We'll see how it goes. But they're not quite. Yeah. I've always thought that at the point when I consider them reasonably finished, I'll start charging for them. And they're not quite finished yet. I also need to start writing Renaissance army lists as well, because God, I mean, there's going to be could be 100 of them. It could be at least 100. I mean, we've got 200. I was looking yesterday. I think I've got 241 army lists. Will be out when I publish next week. In some areas, the ancient lists are pretty much complete. Whole swathes of history. For instance, the sort of Hellenistic period is now really, really well covered. The Roman period's really well covered. Medieval, I've still got a lot more to add. I think we've got 100 odd medieval lists.
You have an idea.
Yeah, there are 3 more coming out. I think 2 more samurai lists and Nanchao. I've got to pronounce Chinese coming out next week. But there are still some areas where Eastern Europe not very well covered yet. Western Europe's pretty well covered. Italy. Another area we haven't really covered, Persia. I've still got to work on those. The lists I know quite well from my own reading were all done a while back, so I need to try and bring in people who've got some knowledge of a particular list if it's one that isn't familiar to me. We're going forward. It's going well. So I like to add half a dozen lists a month, and to polish the list that we've got. It's starting to look. The last 2 months, really, since we issued it in this PDF form, it just looks so much more finished. The production values are much better than they were previously as Excel spreadsheets, and they're more accessible. And I think once I got some pictures in there as well, I think that will really help with people engaging with them. Because one of the things that got me back into the wargaming again a while back was the WAB books. Although I never played WAB, I played a couple of games, but I didn't play it very much. The production values and the eye candy were just so fantastic that it did inspire me to collect figures and ultimately to write my own rules. So the pictures are really important. I've got. I know you were chatting with David Imrie a week or 2 ago.
Yes, it was before you.
Yeah, and I've managed to blag a few pictures of him, of some of his lovely Cressy figures for the 100 Years War list. And
it's brilliant.
I've got pictures. And I've got a picture of the front cover of the medieval book. It's got a lovely picture of the Cressy that he did with his chums at Partisan.
Simon Chick, I think, it was a couple of more guys. Yeah.
Simon Chick
and a couple more guys.
I mean, that's just such a
It was brilliant.
Battle.
That's
like 300 knights. I think they had on that table, mounted knights. And
it was brilliant.
I mean, that's absolutely inspired me. I'm madly collecting figures for the it's early Italian wars at the moment, and Swiss and Burgundians. So I'm doing, as ever is ever my way. I'm trying to collect 6 armies simultaneously. I think the Burgundians, the Swiss, Florence, Milan, and Venice. Yeah, I think it's just the 5. But it's fascinating. I'm learning so much as well. I was chatting with Simon Chick online this morning, who really knows his stuff terrifically well for that period, about Italian knights. I hadn't really realised until chatting with him that they all wore leather-barded horses. I didn't know that. Fornovo, I'd always assumed that they had steel barding on their horses with some sort of but leather, hardened leather. I never knew. So every night I'm sculpting leather armor onto peri-plastic horses. Every night.
What about you also co-wrote King and Parliament, correct? This is I don't know the period at all. Of course, I can imagine it's based on To the Strongest rules.
It is, yeah. It's pretty close.
And if you can talk about us, I mean, is it about the? I don't know the era at all. It's usually, is it like Pack and Shot, something like this? King and Parliament?
Yeah, it is. It's quite a narrow scope. So.
Why did you do it? I mean, it's a narrow scope. Is it popular in England, in UK, or it is?
Oh, it is. It is. It's a very popular. English Civil War is a very popular era. Number of rule sets that address it. Well, the reason I wrote it, I was looking for something to do after publishing To the Strongest. I wanted to come up with a second set, and Andrew, my friend Andrew, who, I've known for a few years since he got playing To the Strongest, said, this would adapt really well, and he sort of mocked up a scenario, Battle of Montgomery, and suggested how some of the rules might work. And at the time, I didn't know the English Civil War particularly well, because of the last set. I had once previously written a set of rules for the English Civil War, but I was only 11 years old, and they were very, very bad. I kind of got involved with it with Andrew. I love the look of the figures. They're fantastic to collect. And for me, I have a very big collection of figures. I love collecting figures. I do it. I buy figures every day, pretty much. So Andrew started to talk to me about the period, and I did get interested in it. And we kind of we had a look at the rules, and a lot of the areas are pretty much common. The deployments, the activation system is very, very similar. Losing medals when a unit is lost. The main difference with the English Civil War is that almost every unit can shoot, which isn't the case really in the ancient period. So we needed to change the mechanisms for the shooting aspect of it. And shooting is probably more important than melee once you get into that period. I looked at whether I was going to write a set of rules that went from about 1618 through till 1660, 1670. But in the end, we wrote a very specific set of rules that pretty much covers warfare in England from about 1640 to 1650, or plus a couple of years either side of it. And part of the reason I went that way was that I wanted it, rather than being a really generic set of rules, I wanted it to have a really good period flavour. By making it exactly the English Civil War, I was able to use woodcuts to illustrate the rules. We used a font that's similar to the fonts in the English Civil War, and I think that gives it a real sense of of it being tied to that one period. The other good thing about it was that I by the time we'd done the research, I did feel I knew the English Civil War pretty well, but I didn't know very much about the earlier period. So, for instance, if we'd have tried to extend it to cover the 30 Years' War as well, I think there might have been issues. I want to keep the scope quite narrow. I still hope to do the 30 Years' War at some point. In fact, I've been kicking a few ideas around about another set that might beyond. I mean, I suppose to talk a little bit about what I'm doing at the moment, I'm mainly writing Renaissance rules that will go from perhaps 1470, 1480 through till about 1600. About maybe 1618 through to the start of the 30 Years' War. But I'm kicking around another mechanism that I hope to be able to use for warfare after the English Civil War initially. I'm quite interested in Sedgemoor, the 9 Years' War in England, the French against the Dutch in 1672. I'm looking for something that will work for that. And I've got a side of A4 rule set that would work for that at the moment, using many of the mechanisms that people are familiar with.
I mean, you're basically extending the rules in different eras, and that's very interesting what you're doing. You told us your plans, but do you have plans of going later? You have in our hobby, Napoleonics is one of the most popular era.
Yeah.
Or American Civil War. Are you planning to move along?
Yeah. I think
because sorry to interrupt you, because I have a feeling, although I don't know the era very well, but from friends, I have the feeling that the grid system, especially for those periods, would be perfect because the units moved, very differently than they moved in the medieval and ancient times. They moved most like a grid, they were moving in battalions and very properly. And so do you have a plan in moving in a direction after, of course, you have the Renaissance, but do you have a plan of moving to other eras, maybe more modern ones?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interest in doing different periods, and I would love to be doing all of them. I've played American Civil War a number of years back. We played, I can't remember what the rule system was, but more recently I played a bit of Longstreet with a friend, and I thought that was a very, very good system. Sam and Stafford had some very clever systems. I love the way that you fought the battle, and after the battle, everyone died of disease. It was really, really brutal and realistic, and I'm sure if I ever do a set of campaign rules, I'll certainly be incorporating disease as he did. I thought that was a great mechanism. So the trouble is, I'm quite a slow writer. I mean, I've only published 2 sets. I have Renaissance mostly written. Part of the reason for this is I'm a slow writer. The other part of the reason is that I spend a lot of time supporting the material I've already written. So after Renaissance is out, we'll just see where I go. I mean, possibilities are one thing I came into wargaming from a fantasy background, and I would very much like to produce a set of fantasy rules, which would follow fairly well from the ancient, medieval, and Renaissance. And I know roughly how they would work. In fact, I even started writing them a few years back, before we got distracted with the English Civil War. So that's one thing I would like to do. I'm very interested in doing the sort of lace wars, because I just love, I know it sounds a ridiculous thing, but I love the uniforms. I love those long frock coats and they just look so. They look so. There's a sort of quaint look to them because you can see in them. They're not. Everyone's familiar with English Civil War and everyone's familiar with Napoleonics, and you have a pretty good idea what soldiers in the War of the Spanish Succession look like. But those soldiers in the late 17th century, they just look. The uniforms are just incredibly different. I would like to do that, but my interests are quite diverse. I've got a big Napoleonic army, which I've never used. I've been collecting it, but it's never seen most of it's never seen action. And I'd love to get those on the table. American Civil War, it would work really well for. It would absolutely work really well for. And I did play that, and yeah, that again, it's just really a question of how fast I can write. I think. I mean, one good bit of news is that the good thing about writing for King and Parliament was that some of the mechanisms that are in there are more streamlined than they were in the ancient set. And in the Renaissance draft, I've built on some of the King and Parliament mechanisms, and they're even more streamlined now. So if you like, I've got the engine that drives the rules is really now really quite sophisticated, but I need to kind of build the car around it each time. But I can hopefully cut and paste big sections of the activation system is going to be pretty much the same across all the games. No doubt the firing will be quite similar, the save mechanisms, the way you work out who's won the game and lost the game, deployment, all these things are pretty much common. So it ought to be possible to write other sets, as long as I don't change too much in the engines. I am a bit of a tinkerer, but it ought to be fairly quick to write other sets based on the new draft. And that incorporates everything I've learned over the last 5 years. So I really need to get it into playtesting.
You have the core rules anyway, so you can elaborate from there and put it. I want to ask you something. You mentioned it before. You talked about when you will decide to do a campaign rules, and I will catch this and ask you. Many gamers, and this is a personal question because after a while, I'm a bit bored of playing battles that one battle that don't have a continuation. One battle doesn't influence the other. So there is something that I look forward in booklets or supplements from rule sets, that somebody will bring a campaign. For example, in the 100 Years' War, one that I'm focusing only 100 Years' War. I love the period. So someone will create it. Yeah. If you check the channel, you'll see the videos. And Chevauchée, for example, because I want, with the pitched battle in the end, because I want I would be very interested in my battles to have a continuation. Is there something in your mind, using to the strongest as a core rule set to create a campaign? Because you mentioned it, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah. Something I was working on back during COVID, was a selection of battles from the Punic Wars, which we were hoping to find a way of tying together and publishing as a sort of a mini campaign. And I've written 2 or 3 of them, but I haven't published them yet because I got caught up in this drive to bring out the PDF versions of the army list, which I think is probably a more general and more useful thing to do. But we've written a number of battles using the same troops, but they don't directly lead into each other. You're right. I mean, I do completely agree with you about campaigns. We talked about, for the English Civil War rules, we talked about doing a Montrose campaign set in Scotland, with the battles loosely connected and things from one battle affecting the next battle. But I haven't done I haven't done a campaign set, and it would be a fantastic, an absolutely fantastic thing to do. A lot of campaigns don't get finished, but I think that the thing about the rules is that they are pretty easy to master, and quite quick to play. So it ought to be possible to write a set of rules where you've got 5 or 6 battles and one leads into the next and the forces change and you get reinforcements. Sam Mustafa does that so well with that Longstreet. I mean, it's just absolutely brilliant. You know, you can get promoted and or demoted, and the nature of the army changes as different sorts of reinforcements arrive, different weapons. It would be a lot of fun to do something with a number of connected battles. We've been playing these. You're right. It would be a very good thing to think about. I'll try and have a chat with a few people. I don't want to distract myself too much from what I'm doing at the moment, because
as a future plan.
One of my friends locally has been producing. My friend Ian, he also lives in Muswell Hill in North London, near me.
We were neighbours. I used to live in Hampstead when I was in the UK.
Oh, very nice. Posh.
Yeah.
We like Hampstead, yeah, very near. My friend Ian has been studying the Italian wars and producing sequential maps that showed, where the campaigns went, who marched from where to where, when. And he's really interested in that. And I was talking with him when I last saw him last week about how we might do something with it. I think it would be a really good idea to do something based on it, because the maps he's got some map generating software. They're really stunning, and I haven't quite worked out how to do them yet. But it would be very simple to have something to set up a little bespoke campaign where you had 3 or 4 players, each representing a different place, a different town, and fighting loosely connected battles. I will give that some more thought. I'll definitely give that some more thought. One of the other things I thought it would work very well for is the sort of the new mechanism I'm coming up with for the 17th century, the later 17th century. That's got a slightly different vibe to it, where I've got part battalions, companies, effectively. It's easier to do things like attrition when you've got subunits, and hopefully the companies will be able to be combined in different ways to form different sorts of units. So you might have a unit of cavalry with a troop of dragoons attached, or you might be able to detach the grenadiers from your battalions to form a converged grenadier battalion. So that would be another one where it would work very well.
Well, you have an advantage because your rule set is designed to be quite fast. So using to the strongest, you can, as you said before, so the case with the campaigns that many people want is that they don't finish very easily because it takes time. But you have an advantage with the strongest, that it's a quite quick game, that maybe your campaigns will finish because your game is quite fast anyway.
It's interesting you mention it. I'll have a talk with my friend Ian next week. We might be able to do something like use a set of cards that could be used in reinforcement cards that come up after a battle with random events and things in that add that colour to the rules. And again, one of the things I really liked about WAB was that the colour that they injected into the army lists by using, wherever possible, they often used the original name for a unit. So rather than referring to a unit as bodyguard, they might be Churlu if they're a Welsh bodyguard. I love that, the colour that there is in that sort of thing. And campaigns also really add colour and depth
exactly
wargaming. But one thing I do think is quite good about To the Strongest is when you talk to someone after a battle. I've kept most of the abbreviations out of the rules. There's only one abbreviation, which for two-handed cutting weapons. That's one too many. But I think one of the nice things about it when you have a game that's over, and you ask someone what happened, they'll tell the game in a very narrative way that does sound a little bit like someone describing a real battle, throwing in the names of the units. Which I generally try and keep in Latin or Greek or Hoplitai or Legionarii or whatever. It does. People, I think you get more immersion that way, and I think a campaign adds even more immersion. The people can then go down the pub or in the bar after they've played their game in the pub upstairs. They can tell the war stories over a pint of beer, which is I think such a good thing.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. Yeah, really.
Can I ask you something else? There is, we're already. I can't believe we're talking 1 hour. It was very fast.
You're right.
I'm glad you're enjoying. I'm enjoying it too much. I just want to ask you a question. There is a let's say a video going around in the community of wargaming. Sometimes somebody releases a question and everybody responds with videos. So there is a video with the title saying, "Is historical wargaming dying?" And I want to ask your opinion about this.
It's difficult, isn't it? It's a difficult question. I mean, certainly when you go to the competitive events, often the age group is older at the competitive historical things, but not always. There are always a number of younger players around, but in general, the average age is oldish. But I did go to a show last year, London GT, where they had the crowd coming along for that was noticeably, visibly very much younger. People in their 20s and 30s were probably the majority, and they were playing fantasy games, as you say. I think there are a couple of things. Firstly, you don't need to have a lot of money to play To the Strongest. You can probably put an army together for maybe £100 out of Perry plastic figures. I love those Perry plastic figures. I think they're fantastic. The quality of them. But the cost of it, to some extent, the cost is a barrier. I think for younger people to enter. The people in their 20s and 30s don't always have a lot of disposable income. So I think that's one issue. And the other thing is maybe they don't get quite the same exposure to historical films that we did when we were young. I mean, every weekend I used to watch, Ben-Hur or I love all those old historical
Spartacus,
the Vikings. I mean, they're just Taras Bulba. That's another one. I often remember watching that one so well when I was a kid. And perhaps people don't watch those as much these days as they used to, and perhaps fewer people come in because of that. However, I think the way I would personally, from a personal objective, I do need to write the set of fantasy rules because I think that we had Warhammer Historical and people came into Warhammer Historical because they played Warhammer Fantasy. I do think that would offer a way across for fantasy players into historical gaming. And I think that I really do. I think that it's important to build that bridge and hope that some of them cross it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I can appreciate.
There aren't enough people playing the historical games. We need more people to be playing it. It's so fascinating learning about history from wargaming.
Yeah, true. Like history, learning about history is half of the fun.
It is. I mean, it's fun. That's what I've enjoyed so much over the last couple of years. I mean, English Civil War. I learned a terrific amount about it. I have a huge English Civil War collection now. A lot of them are from David Imrie, actually. I learned a good deal about how the English Civil War worked, and I'm learning now about the late 17th century. I'm learning about the Renaissance, and reading as much as I can. And I find that absolutely fascinating. We need more people to be able to do that, and I do want to kind of reach back to try and get some more of the younger people across into playing it. We do have some really good young players, just not enough of them. I'd like them to be a much higher proportion of the available players. There are other things coming out that might be a bridge. Those lovely plastic Rofun figures. Printed on the acrylics. I think that's a brilliant way for people to get across. But then again, do the younger crowd have the disposable income? Well, I suppose if they're playing Warhammer, they probably do.
Yeah, for sure.
They must be spending a lot of money down at those GW shops.
Yeah, of course, right.
Perhaps they do have the money. But yeah, very important. We get them over.
Simon, thank you so much. It was one great hour. I don't want to impose more to you. Thank you so much for coming and joining us. So I'd like to recap before the end of all the chat. So basically, you're tweaking to the strongest. You're adding new things, new amendments every so often. So you improving your rules.
Yeah.
And you're planning. You have King and Parliament, and are you planning a Renaissance? So, and generally, let's go in the long run, you're planning to move to the strongest in one shape or form to different eras. That's your plans for the future.
Yeah, basically, my plan is to I'll get the Renaissance done. After that, I'll have to make a decision about whether I write one set or I write two sets in parallel. Definitely, I have got to do fantasy in the next year or so, because for the reasons we talked about, I really do want to bring those young people across if they want to play. I just think it would be really great to get more young people gaming. And I'm personally quite interested in moving forward further into the gunpowder era. I am certainly very interested in I'm collecting Sedgemoor, I'm collecting 1672 and War of the Spanish Succession, and Napoleonics. And I need a set of rules to play these games with myself. So those will definitely happen. Those have got to happen. And yeah, so that's more or less where I'm going. It'll be the same rule engine, sometimes with some tweaks where they're needed. But who knows? Anyhow, who knows what will turn up? I'll be as surprised as anyone probably when the next set of rules comes around. It could be anything. I quite like Western Desert World War II. That would work very well with To the Strongest.
Yeah, true.
It would work extremely well. I did sketch out some ideas for how that would work, so maybe that will come up. And I'll surprise myself with something completely random. But thank you so much for interviewing me. It's been a great.
No, thank you so much, Simon, for coming. I really appreciate it. I really had great fun.
Stick a note in your diary. Drop me a line next year when we've got after Christmas. Hopefully, I'll have a date for Renaissance coming out, and
sure we for sure will do a chat when you have the new rules coming out. We'll do a chat and showcase them to the guys.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to download the army lists and have a look at them, or drop me a line, I'm happy to discuss it if people want to talk about it. The army list, it's all in the BigRedBat Shop, and you'll see there's a TTS ancient army lists and a
I will put a link. I will put the link because I'm following. I will put the link under the description of the video when we post it. I will post it today or tomorrow. So don't worry, I will put everything there. Thank you so much, for coming, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the interview. I surely did. Thank you for watching, and bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.